So, hello, YouTube. Welcome back. I know it's been a while, probably about 3 months since I made my last video. I decided to take the summer off and just enjoy myself and get out of the studio for a while and let those creative juices start to flow all on their own. And then I'm back now. I've got a few projects that I have to work on, but in the meantime, I wanted to make this quick video for you on the Rupert Neve Master Bus Transformer. And we're going to get to that right after this. Okay, so welcome back again. G-Sharp Jams here at FX Studio 2, and today we're going to talk about that Rupert Neve Master Bus Transformer. Now, this is their third addition to their Master Bus line. They have the Master Bus Processor, they have the Master Bus Compressor, and now they've added the Master Bus Transformer. Now, quick disclaimer, I don't own it. I've never used it. This is strictly based upon my research that I've done on the product and a couple of discussions that I've had with the people over at Rupert Neve. And we're going to take it from there and take this for what it's worth. So let's jump into it. The Rupert Neve Master Bus Transformer is basically a color box. Just as you would use the solid state logic fusion as a color box, this is what the MBT is designed to be, a color box. It adds weight, it adds dimension, it adds 3D spacing. It comes with a color comp, which is a colored compressor, which is an opto compressor that they've included there. But let's start right from the beginning so that there's no confusion. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm actually looking at a picture of it on my screen here so I don't forget anything. It has 6 different sections. The first section being the input section. Now, very simply, that there's no rocket science involved here. The input section is basically where you're going to have your trim control and the high pass filter frequency dial. Okay, straightforward, no rocket science there. That's your input section. Then you have your equalizer section. Now, you know, as far as I'm concerned, and I've said it before, an EQ is an EQ is an EQ. I mean, how much can you really do with an equalizer? Now, some equalizers, the low frequencies, are going to give you a lot thicker bottom, and some equalizers, the high frequencies, will give you a lot more shine on that high end. But other than that, you've got peak, you've got shelf, all these different things that you can get within an equalizer. But as far as I'm concerned, an EQ is an EQ. The Master Bus Transformer comes with an EQ that gives you a low shelf and a high shelf. So it's basically taming those low ends and the high ends and just making everything nice and even and smoothed out for you. So there's your EQ section. Then you have the color comp section. Now this is where this thing really shines. What exactly is it? Well, it's a compressor of sorts. It's a compressor. And it does have a blend knob so that you can mix in the compressed with the uncompressed sound and come up with a different flavor of sound. It also has a side chain high pass filter, which is very important if you want to maintain the bottom end so that that compressor isn't hitting those low end frequencies and making things sound muddy. So this becomes very important as well. And you have the threshold knob, which is going to control the amount of compression that you're using. It has a release knob and it has a gain as well. What is the difference between this color comp and just using a regular compressor? Well, it adds color. And it adds a lot of color. When you use this thing, if you decide to purchase it, keep in mind that that color comp adds a lot of color to the sound. Okay, it's an opto compressor. It can be very clean and it can get a little bit dirty on the other end of the spectrum. So that's your color comp. Now, I'm going through each one of these individually. I'm going to come back and put it all together and say, okay, well, what do I end up with this color box that we're discussing here today? Next, you have the width control. Now, this width control is basically taken from the stereo field editor, which is in their master bus processor, but it's a scaled down version. Still, very powerful, even though it is scaled down. It gives you that 3D effect that you can get on an individual track or for your overall mix, on your mix bus. Okay? Now, it is a bit scaled down from what you would get from the stereo field editor with their master bus processor, but it is still very effective. And here's why I say that, because with all of the different things that you can do with the stereo field editor in the master bus processor, you still have to be very careful with it, because if you overdo adjusting that stereo field, things start to sound washed out and all over the place, and the clarity of the mix is lost. Rupert Neve decided we're going to include a width control on the master bus transformer, but it's going to give you more room to work with, but not as many features as the SFE, the stereo field editor in the MBP. I believe they did that purposely because, number one, you can overdo it when using a stereo field editor because you're so tempted to use everything that it has, and you think, oh, wow, listen to this, oh, listen to that, and you think it sounds great, and then you go back and you play it back in your car or on Spotify or whatever, or maybe you've got a CD player in the car. Who remembers CD players? Anyway, and all of a sudden, it doesn't sound the same. It sounded great in the studio, but when you listen back to it, doesn't sound as good because you've overdone it. But still, all of that said, the width control on this piece of gear is fantastic. And again, it gives you more width than that SFE, stereo field editor, on the master bus processor. Okay, so it gives you more, but it also gives you less because it doesn't have as many features as the SFE. Then, my favorite piece of this piece of gear is the Super Silk. What is Super Silk? Well, we know that Rupert Neve has a few modules out there that give you Silk Red or Silk Blue. This is the first module that they've come up with that gives you both Silk Red and Silk Blue individually. That means you can take Silk Red, turn it up a little bit, and then take Silk Blue and turn it up a bit, and mix the two together in what they call Silk Purple. So now you have a third color using silk, Silk Purple, combination of red and blue. This can make things very, very interesting, depending on how you use it. I think it is a great addition. I would love to see them come out with this Silk Purple on anything else that they put out as far as a color box is concerned. Fantastic, Rupert Neve, great job. I know a lot of people have been asking for it for a long time. You finally did it, and you put it on this master bus transformer. So kudos to you for finally getting this out to the people who have been waiting for it. The last section is the output section. Again, very simple. You have an output trim along with a meter to show you the levels of your output. Now, let's put this all together. The master bus transformer is going to give you an equalizer, which is only a shelf on the low end and the high end. It's going to give you the color comp, which is going to add a little bit of dirt, or you can keep it clean. And it's going to give you that width control so that you can get that 3D spatial sound on an individual stem or on the entire mix. And then finally you have the silk, the Super Silk, which gives you Silk Red and Silk Blue for a new color, Silk Purple. What does this mean to you as the audio engineer? Well, it's called a master bus transformer. You would think that they call it a master bus transformer because it's intended to be used on the master bus, which it is. However, when you take a look at everything that this piece of equipment has to offer, you can use it on the master bus. You can use it strictly on drums. You can use it strictly on a vocal track. you can use it strictly on a guitar track. So you have the option of using it where you want to use it in your project. Spoke to one of the representatives over at Rupert Neve Designs and asked them a question regarding the comparison of this color box to their 542 500 series module. And so the answer that I got kind of surprised me. They said, well, the 542 is more comparable to the Super Silk than it is to the color comp. Now, my thought was, when I first called them, I said, well, if it's a color comp, we know that compression is a derivative of saturation. The 542 is a saturator. So my thinking is that the 542 is going to be more comparable to that color comp because it's going to add color and it's going to add a bit of compression, which basically is what the 542 does. However, they said, no, it's more in line and more comparable to the Super Silk. And I'm thinking that's because it gives you both Silk Red and Silk Blue. And to recreate Silk Red and Silk Blue both at the same time, you would have to have two 542s working. Interesting. Interesting to say the least. Now, final thoughts. Is it worth the price tag of $4,000? We all know Rupert Neve puts out nothing but high quality products. End of story. $4,000 is a lot of money for a lot of people to shell out for one piece of equipment. However, remember that, as I always say, you get what you pay for. Next, if you were to buy the Rupert Neve 500 series EQ, their 500 series compressor, and then two 542s, which go for about $900 each, somewhere in that neighborhood, you're looking at $4,000. And you still don't have the width control. And I say width, W-I-T-H, because I have a hard time saying W-I-D-T-H, so just excuse me on that. But you don't get that width control. The addition of the width control makes it much more sensible than going out and buying 4 individual modules that you're going to pay $4,000 for, and then you have to buy another module that's going to give you the ability to manipulate that stereo field. Probably going to run you somewhere between $600, $700, $800, $900, $1,000 anyway. So now you're up to $4,500 to $5,000, whereas this one box does all of that for $4,000. Now, I know a lot of us don't have deep pockets like that, but if you are serious about what you're doing, if you have a commercial studio, if you do your own recordings and then go ahead and produce them and put them on Spotify or any of the other streaming services that are out there, this is something that I would seriously take a look at. What about comparing it to the Fusion, which is another color box by another great company, Solid State Logic, and we all know how great Solid State Logic is. Why wouldn't I get the Fusion as compared to this one and save myself about $1,200, $1,300 by getting the Fusion? Here's the difference. While they are both color boxes, the end product is completely different. Completely different. The Fusion has a high frequency compressor. This does not. Folks may say, well, I can use Silk Red along with that color comp to adjust those high frequencies and compress them. Yes, you can, but the sound is going to be completely different from what you would get actually using a high frequency compressor, which is going to tame the peaks on those high ends for you. That's number one. Number two, the EQ on the Fusion has a lot more to offer than the EQ on the Master Bus Transformer. Not to say that it's better than the EQ on the MBT. It just offers more functionality. Number 3, you have the vintage drive on the Fusion. This does not give you a drive, so to speak, within the piece of equipment. Now, can you drive it? You absolutely can. You absolutely can, and drive it and get some color to come out of it, especially with that color comp. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. So the bottom line here is it comparable to the Fusion? Is it better than the Fusion? No and no. Two completely different pieces of gear. Now, what is the downside of the master bus transformer? Here it is. Just one thing, aside from price, it is pricey, but the other thing being, there's no insert. And when I first looked at this, I was very excited about it and seriously considering buying it. I'm still seriously considering buying it. However, Rupert Neve, why didn't you put an insert on the back of this thing? If you put an insert on the back of this thing, I would gladly, without hesitation, pay the $4,000 for it. Without hesitation. I'm trying to wrap my head around why they didn't include an insert on this piece of gear, whereas the SSL Fusion does have an insert. For some producers and audio engineers, that is a game changer. That's a big deal. So I'm not quite sure why they didn't include the insert on this piece of gear, but that's their marketing department. That's their engineers. They did what they did. It's still a fantastic piece of gear. All of that being said, again, just my opinions. I've never used it. I don't own it, but I do intend to own it because I think for what you get for the money, it is well worth the purchase price. And it will be used, and used very often, which is the bottom line. Am I going to buy it? Okay. Now, am I going to use it? And am I going to use it often? Always ask myself those questions before I buy a piece of gear. So that being said, that's going to wrap it up. And again, thank you to all of my subscribers who hung in there with me. I know it's been about 3 months since I've done anything. Did some traveling, just got away from the studio and regrouped a little bit. And over here, rewiring the studio yet again. I've got a project that I'm getting ready to work on, so I have to switch a few of the modules out and take some out. I'm going to be using the distressor on this next project, which I'm going to do a video on coming up pretty soon on that distressor. Great compressor. But again, thanks for hanging in there with me. Thank you for not unsubscribing. I appreciate it. Continue to watch, and as I always say, keep creating. Continue to think outside of the box, because if you did it and it sounds right, then it was right.